afternoon and welcome everyone to the online Garden of the World. I'm Sanjeevani from Kadam Dance, and I'm very pleased to be working with the Welwyn and Hatfield Interfaith Group and their U3A Poetry Group to present to you Gardens in Poetry. Gardens is a subject beloved of poets, and we have a selection of wonderful poems to share with you today. I'm going to begin by handing to Diana Holt, who will start with an extract from Genesis.
And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden. And the Lord God took the man whom he had formed and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it.
Thank you, Diana. I'm Sanjeevani from Kadam Dance. I'm a dancer and a publisher, a lover of poetry, and I'm very pleased to be reading for you a poem set in the 8th century by the Chinese. He was a poet and a Mandarin, and the flowering tree, is the title. I took money and bought flowering trees and planted them on the bank to the east of the keep. I simply bought whatever had most blossoms, not caring whether peach, apricot or plum, 100 fruits, all mixed up together, 1,000 branches flowering in due rotation, for each has its season, coming early or late, but to all alike. The soil is fertile and kind. The red flowers hang like a heavy mist. The white flowers gleam like a fall of snow. The wandering bees cannot bear to leave them. The sweet birds come here to roost. In front flows an ever-running stream. Beneath there, I built a little flat terrace. Sometimes I sweep the flagstones. Sometimes in the wind, I raise my cup and drink. The flowering branches screen my head from the sun. The bower buds fall down in my lap. I sit alone, drinking and singing my song. Thank you. I'm now going to hand to David, who is going to read a prose extract for us.
Hello, I'm David. This is a reading from Monty Don's book, The Down to Earth, from the introduction. It is prose, but I think you'll agree that he writes in the most poetic way. It is easy to cast yourself in the role of a conductor, controlling every note and beat in the garden. But modesty is the only response. Even the best gardener is not so much a conductor as a cross between the caretaker, making sure the light bulbs are replaced, and a member of the audience with the best seat in the house. Life is short and absurd and run through with pain and sorrow, and even in the face of real suffering, gardening can make our days shine with joy. Gardens can heal. When you are sad, a garden comforts. When you are humiliated or defeated, a garden consoles. When you are lonely, it offers companionship that is true and lasting. When you are weary, Your garden will soothe and refresh you. You need luck to be happy, but make a garden and you increase your chances. As if I ought to introduce you.
Hello, I'm Pam Williams, and I've lived in Hatfield and worked and studied here since the early 70s. I'm going to read Andrew Marvell's The Garden. Andrew Marvell was writing in the 17th century. He was very much a public man, having been an MP for about 25 years, a follower of Cromwell and a friend of Milton's. But here he celebrates the solace and peace of a garden and the solitude. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm, the oak or bays, and their incessant labours see crowned from some single herb or tree, whose short and narrow verged shade does prudently their toils upbraid, while all flowers and all trees do close to weave the garlands of repose. Fair quiet have I found thee here, and innocence thy sister dear. Mistaken long I sought you then, in busy companies of men. Your sacred plants, if here below, only among the plants will grow. Society is all but rude to this delicious solitude. No white nor red was ever seen so amorous as this lovely green. Fond lovers, cruel as their flame, cut in these trees their mistress' name. Little, alas, they know or heed how far these beauties hers exceed. Fair trees, wheresoe'er your bark's eye wound, no name shall but your own be found. When we have run our passion's heat, love hither makes his best retreat. The gods that mortal beauty chase, still in a tree did end their race. Apollo hunted Daphne so, only that she might laurel grow, and Pan did after Syrinx speed, not as a nymph, but for a reed. What wondrous life is this I lead? Ripe apples drop about my head, the luscious clusters of the vine upon my mouth do crush their wine. The nectarine and curious peach into my hands themselves do reach, stumbling on melons as I pass, ensnared with flowers, I fall on grass. Meanwhile, the mind, from pleasures less, withdraws into its happiness. The mind, that ocean where each kind does straight its own resemblance find, yet it creates, transcending these, far other worlds and other seas, annihilating all that's made to a green thought in a green shade.
I'm Marion Rodway. I live in Welwyn Garden City. I've lived there for a very long time. I'm a member of the local U3A. I have a large garden that I'm very fond of, and I'm going to read you a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning from the middle of the 19th century. It's a poem from her rather nostalgic childhood. It's entitled The Deserted Garden. I mind me in the days departed, how often underneath the sun, with childish bounds I used to run to a garden long deserted. The beds and walks were vanished quite, and wheresoe'er had struck the spade, the greenest grasses nature laid to sanctify her right. I called the place my wilderness, for no one entered there but I. The sheep looked in, the grass to espy, and passed it nevertheless. The trees were interwoven and spread their boughs enough about to keep both sheep and shepherd out, but not a happy child. Adventurous joy it was for me. I crept beneath the boughs and found a circle smooth of mossy ground beneath a poplar tree. Old garden rose trees hedged it in, betroked with roses, waxen white, well satisfied with dew and light, and careless to be seen. Long years ago it might befall, when all the garden flowers were trim, The grave old gardener prided him of these the most of all. It did not move my grief to see the trace of human step departed, because the garden was deserted, the blither place for me, and gladdest hours for me did glide in silence of the rose tree wall. A thrush made gladness musical upon the other side. I'm now going to pass you over to David Steed, who's going to read you a poem by R.W. Emerson.
Oh, hello, I'm David. I came here with my wife Annette in 1958. Annette was the niece of one of the founder fathers of the Garden City, Richard Rice. Now, this is a poem which I don't know whether it's a brilliant poem, but it's very prescient in the present time when we're all locked away. He has a phrase in the poem which says, "Millions of flowers under the ground." And he says, "Oh, the pretty young things through the coldest days, imprisoned in walls of brown, they never lost heart, though the blast shrieked loud." So this is a flower chorus. Oh, such a commotion under the ground, when March called, "Ho there, ho!" Such spreading of rootlets far and wide, such whisperings to and fro. "Are you ready?" the snowdrop asked. "Almost, my dear," the Scilla replied. "I'll follow as soon as you go." Of laughter sweet and low from millions of flowers under the ground. Yes, millions beginning to grow. "I'll promise my blossoms," the crocus said, "when I hear the blackbird sing." And straight thereafter Narcissus cried, "My silver and gold I'll bring." And ere their dulled another spoke, but the violet only murmured, "I'm here." The sweet grew the air of spring. Then, the chorus came of laughter sweet and low from millions of flowers under the ground. Yes, millions beginning to grow. Oh, the pretty brave things through the coldest days, imprisoned the walls of brown. They never lost heart, though the blast shrieked loud and the sleet and the hail came down, but patiently each wrought her wonderful dress or fashioned her beautiful crown. And now they're coming to lighten the world, still shadowed by winter's frown. And well may they cheerily laugh, in laughter sweet and low, the millions of flowers under the ground, yes, millions beginning to grow. And I think I'm meant to introduce somebody. But who am I meant to introduce?
I think you're meant to introduce me, David, but I will do it myself.
Hello, Diana. Well, good, very good.
I am Diana Holt. I've lived in the village of Digswell since 1985, quite near to the Digswell Viaduct and also the beautiful Digswell Lakes, which is a wonderful, peaceful place to walk in these stressful times. My poem is called God's Garden, and it's by Dorothy Frances Gurney, who was born in 1858. Both of her parents were Anglican priests. I love this poem because I love the author's description of the first ever garden, the Garden of Eden. And as a Christian, I also like the fact that she reminds me that God gave his life for me in another garden, the Garden of Gethsemane. And I think you'll recognise the fourth verse of this poem, which people who love their gardens often quote. The Lord God planted a garden in the first white days of the world, and he set there an angel warden in a garment of light unfurled, so near to the peace of heaven that the hawk might nest with the wren, For there, in the cool of the even, God walked with the first of men. And I dream that those garden closes, with their shade and their sun-flecked sod, and their lilies and bowers of roses, were laid by the hand of God. The kiss of the sun for pardon, and the song of the birds for mirth. One is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. For he broke it for us in a garden under the olive trees, where the angel of strength was the warden, and the soul of the world found ease. And now I'll hand over to Sam, who will read a very well-known poem by Rupert Brooke.
Hello, I'm Sam. I'm going to read some of The Old Vicarage, Grantchester, by Rupert Brooke. In May 1812, when he wrote this poem, Brooke was in a cafe in Berlin, feeling homesick and longing for his garden in England. Just now, the lilac is in bloom, all before my little room. And in my flower beds, I think, smile the carnation and the pink. And down the borders, well I know, the poppy and the pansy blow. Oh, there the chestnuts, summer through beside the river, make for you a tunnel of green gloom and sleep deeply above. And green and deep, the stream mysterious glides beneath, green as a dream and deep as death. Oh, damn, I know it, and I know how the May fields all golden show, and when the day is young and sweet, gild gloriously the bare feet that run to bathe. Du lieber Gott, here am I, sweating, sick and hot, and there the shadowed waters fresh lean up to embrace the naked flesh. Ah, God, to see the branches stir across the moon at Grantchester, to smell the thrilling sweet and rotten, unforgettable, unforgotten river smell, and hear the breeze sobbing in the little trees. Say, do the elm clumps greatly stand, still guardians of that holy land? The chestnuts shade in reverent dream the yet unacademic stream. Is dawn a secret, shy and cold, anadromine, silver gold? On sunset still a golden sea from Haslingfield to Madingley. And after, ere the night is born, do hares come out about the corn? Oh, is the water sweet and cool, gentle and brown above the pool? And laughs the immortal river still under the mill, under the mill? Say, is there beauty yet to find, and certainty and quiet kind? Deep meadows yet for to forget the lies and truths and pain? Oh, yet stands the church clock at 10 to 3, and is there honey still for tea? And now I'll hand over to Jill, who's going to read some Rudyard Kipling.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Jill Longman. I've lived in Welwyn Garden City for nearly 27 years. Not as long as some of our readers this afternoon. I'm reading a poem by Rudyard Kipling in which he presents a garden as a metaphor for achievements only possible through strenuous effort and teamwork. It was first published in 1911 with the impending threat of the First World War looming, and his garden is our England, but we may consider the garden to be our community or the whole world, and the metaphor is just as relevant. The glory of the garden. Our England is a garden that is full of stately views, of borders, beds and shrubberies, and lawns and avenues, with statues on the terraces and peacocks strutting by. But the glory of the garden lies in more than meets the eye. For where the old thick laurels grow along the thin red wall, You'll find the tool and potting sheds, which are the heart of all, the cold frames and the hothouses, the dung pits and the tanks, the rollers, carts and drain pipes with the barrows and the planks. And there you'll see the gardeners, the men and prentice boys, told off to do as they are bid, and do it without noise. For except when seeds are planted and we shout to scare the birds, the glory of the garden, it abideth not in words. And some can pot begonias, and some can bud a rose, and some are hardly fit to trust with anything that grows. But they can roll and trim the lawns, and sift the sand and loam, for the glory of the garden occupieth all who come. Our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, "Oh, how beautiful," and sitting in the shade, while better men than we go out and start their working lives at grubbing weeds from gravel paths with broken dinner knives. There's not a pair of legs so thin, there's not a head so thick, there's not a hand so weak and white, nor yet a heart so sick, but it can find some needful job that's crying to be done, for the glory of the garden glorifieth everyone. Then seek your job with thankfulness, and work till further orders, if it's only netting strawberries or killing slugs on borders. And when your back stops aching and your hands begin to harden, you will find yourself a partner in the glory of the garden. Oh, Adam was a gardener, and God who made him sees that half a proper gardener's work is done upon his knees. So when your work is finished, you can wash your hands and pray for the glory of the garden, that it may not pass away. And the glory of the garden, it shall never pass away. And now I'll hand over to Vishaka.
I'm Vishaka. I'm a friend of Sanjeevani's. And we share our friendship through our love of dance and poetry. I will present to you a poem by Rabindranath Tagore. He wrote it in 1916, and the poem is called Dan. What I bring to you is William Radicchi's translation of this poem, Gift. William introduces it as an exquisitely delicate love poem, and I will present to you an abridged version of William's Gift. Oh, my love, what gift of mine can I give you this dawn? A morning song. But morning does not last long. The heat of the sun wilts it like a flower, and songs that tire are done. My friend, what is it that you ask when you come to my gate at dusk? What shall I bring you? A light? A lamp from the corner of my house? Alas, the wind will blow it out. Whatever my hands can place on yours will slip through your fingers and fall forgotten to dust, to return to dust. Rather, you wander idly in my garden, and suddenly a secret flower's scent may startle you. Let that displaced moment be my gift. Truest treasures are fleeting. They sparkle for a moment and then goes. My friend, whatever you take without asking, without knowing. Let that be yours. Anything that I can give is trifling, be it a flower or a song. Now I pass it to Hazel.
I am Hazel Bell. I came to live in Welwyn Garden City in 1957, not long married, and joined U3A in 2011. Now I am the leader of the U3A poetry group. I'm going to read a poem written by a member of that group, John Westerby. He came to Welwyn Garden City as an evacuee at the age of 80 years ago. The poem is titled The Garden and describes the garden at all its different seasons. The theme is an old one, the resurgence of nature each year, but it does have a more modern twist, a nod to the current theme of the rewilding of nature. That is, returning to the natural state before and without human interference. The garden's winter dead and cold, a pseudo-death of plants now old. The dead of winter, so it said, spring far away, tools in the shed. Dormant, but living still. The gardener isn't needed now, but plants are stirring under snow. Snowdrop, crocus, tiny dreams, braving frost and icy streams. Delicate, but tough. Here comes spring in all its glory. Now the gardener joins the story. He weaves and trains, imposing order on all the flowers in every border. New life from old. Really? Is he really needed? Who cares if rosebuds are unweeded? Nature's rules not too unruly. Let it be. Enjoy the truly wondrous riot of colour. Summer's come and living's pleasure. Enjoy the garden at your leisure. Give no thought for our tomorrow. Autumn's threats no cause for sorrow. Oh look, a fallen leaf. Winter's here, an end of seasons. The plants retreat, they have their reasons. Dormant again to rise next year. They rise and fall, now gone, then here. The beginnings in the end.
And David Steed is going to sing us out of this program.
Well, I'm going to sing a lovely song called Go Lovely Rose. It's a poem by Edmund Young, who was a member of Parliament in the 17th century, a poet and a friend of Dryden. And in the poem, he takes one flower, the rose, symbolizing both the garden and love. Go, lovely rose, tell her that wastes her time and me, that now she knows when I resemble her to thee, how sweet and fair she seems to be. Tell her that's young and shuns to have her graces spied, that hadst thou sprung in deserts where no men abide, thou must have uncommended died. Small is the worth of beauty from the light retired. Bid her come forth, suffer herself to be desired, and for such just to be admired. Then die, that she the common fate of all things rare may read in thee. How small a part of time we share, that art so wondrous sweet and fair.
Thank you for that lovely closing song, David. Thank you all the participants for an enchanting afternoon of poetry and gardens. The wonderful images from green tunnel of gloom to a nation of potting sheds. There is so much richness and beauty and poetry in what we have shared today. It's been a great experience, and I hope more people will listen to this and be inspired and join both U3A and poetry societies wherever they live.